What's up, everyone? So for my first video, I just wanted to give a quick crash course in what psychedelics are so that I could set the foundation for my future videos. I'm just going to start with the basics and then move into some of the latest perspectives in psychology and neuroscience. So let's get started. Alright, so first of all, when I'm talking about psychedelics in this video, I'm mainly referring to the so-called classic psychedelics. So these are LSD, or acid, psilocybin, which is the active compound in magic mushrooms, and DMT / the DMT-containing tea, ayahuasca. So these psychedelics all work primarily on the serotonin system in the brain and can elicit a huge range of radical changes to our experience. From the outset, something that I should say is that something particularly fascinating about these compounds is how different the experiences can be across different trips with the same person, and of course across people. And even within a given psychedelic trip, you can experience a range of mental states and experiential phenomena. And to foreshadow what I'll be talking about later in this video, this basically is a result of the fact that psychedelics seem to amplify what is already present. It'll amplify what is internally present within your mind, and also amplify your sensitivity to the external environment that you're in. Okay, so how do psychedelics affect our experience exactly? If we want to be kind of reductionist about it, we can say there are four primary aspects of our experience that psychedelics can alter. These are our thinking, our emotions, our perception, and our sense of self. So let's just dive into each of these real quick. So thinking. First, something that you'll often notice in a psychedelic experience, especially when you're in a less stimulating environment, is that suddenly your awareness of your thoughts and your mental life will be amplified. You might all of a sudden find yourself noticing the immense depth of our internal experience. In terms of our thoughts, we might all of a sudden remember things we had long forgotten and find ourselves questioning our basic assumptions and beliefs about ourselves and the world. We might also find ourselves making connections between things that we didn't see as related before, or we might think about a familiar problem and have a new perspective or insight about it. Also, another aspect of our changes to our thinking is that our sense of identifying with our thoughts might be reduced. And this is fascinating because usually we live our lives having our thoughts and thinking, this is my thought, it corresponds to me. In the psychedelic experience, you can have the experience, which is often repeated by experienced meditators, that our thoughts are more distant from us and we start to see them as more objective phenomena. That is, we might see them as independent from us and we can kind of watch them the same way we'd watch some clouds passing in the sky. And next is emotion. So one of the hallmarks of the psychedelic experience, particularly at higher doses, is this extreme emotional sensitivity. We might find that our emotions are liable to rapidly changing based on our environment, and this corresponds to this increased sensitivity to both our internal and external environment. So internally, if we have a positive or negative thought, it might be amplified out of proportion and really affect our emotional state. Externally, for example, we could be walking and we could see a flower and all of a sudden be taken aback with awe and gratitude for the immense beauty and mystery of life. Or we could be walking and see a homeless person on the ground and suddenly be hit with a gut-wrenching compassion and empathy, truly feeling the suffering that they're going through. Also, you might feel yourself all of a sudden going through some kind of emotional release. You might find that you're tearing up and starting to cry a little bit, or you might lose yourself in some kind of uncontrollable laughter. And again, of course, there's a huge range of things you can experience here related to your own personal history and the environment that you're in. And next, let's talk about perception. So of course, perception is something that's focused on the most when talking about psychedelic trip. And this also takes a variety of forms. First, kind of more generally, we can often feel as if our senses have been blown wide open. We all of a sudden feel as if we could see every little detail in what we're looking at. And at the same time, you can feel like you can hear every single thing around you. But of course, when we think of perceptual changes, we think of visual changes. And these can take the form of internal imagery, that is with your eyes closed, and also external imagery with your eyes open. So internal imagery can range from you seeing shapes in fractal geometry all the way to having immersive dreamlike experiences which feature landscapes and people and entities and so on. And our external imagery, that is with our eyes open, usually takes the form of either things in your environment warping together or seeming like they're breathing. And sometimes we can have the experience that our psychological contents, that is our thoughts, are being projected symbolically into the environment. And I should say here that the ability for psychedelics to induce full-blown hallucinations of things that are not in the environment at all is extremely rare, if that. And descriptions of the psychedelic experience which focus on this apparent ability are just not accurate characterizations characterizations of what actually happens. And lastly is sense of self. So this is really interesting. So we can think of our sense of self as being composed by two primary components. One is our bodily sense of self, so our sense of being in this body, of not being this table, of ending where our skin ends, and so on. And then also our autobiographical sense of self. So this is our sense of self that's rooted in our memories of who we were in the past and who we're going to be in the future and who we are presently. So you could think of it as this kind of conceptual identity or story you've created of who you are. And so in a psychedelic experience, both these aspects of self can be blurred or dissolved completely. You might all of a sudden feel like your body is merging with the environment and you can't tell where it ends or begins. Or you might all of a sudden lose all attachment to the identity you've created for yourself and kind of just merge into this field of pure awareness. And this latter experience is often referred to as ego dissolution and is an important aspect of so-called mystical experiences. And it's interesting because you would think that losing your sense of identity and self and merging with your environment might be a very frightening thing, which it will be if you're not prepared. But in the context of scientific studies and when people do this with the right preparation and intention, these experiences are rated as some of their most meaningful and significant in their lives. And even in the clinical trials looking at psychedelic treatment for mental health conditions, people who have these ego dissolution or mystical type experiences are the most likely to experience the most positive effects. Alright, so those are the main domains that psychedelics affect. So let's step back and think about what psychedelics do in a more broad sense. Let's start with what the word psychedelic means. So the word psychedelic was coined by the Canadian psychiatrist Humphrey Osmond in 1956. And he coined it in a letter he sent to the famous essayist and novelist Aldous Huxley, because they were both trying to find a more accurate way to characterize this mysterious class of compounds. And so they chose psychedelic. So the word psychedelic is based in two Greek words, psyche, which means mind or soul, and delos, which means to manifest or bring forth. So the word psychedelic literally means to manifest or bring forth one's mind. And the idea behind this is that psychedelics can do just that. They allow us to gain access to aspects of our mind that are usually not accessible to us and kind of throws it in our face, either in our external experience or in the form of memories and images and emotions. And this conception of psychedelic drug effects has persisted throughout time. For example, about 2 decades later, the pioneering LSD psychiatrist Stanislav Grof, after completing thousands of sessions of LSD-assisted psychotherapy with a broad variety of patients, described that he now understood psychedelics as being non-specific amplifiers of unconscious activity. And again, he's getting at the idea that across this broad variety of patients, he saw that aspects of their mind that they were either repressed or never had access to are now being thrown up into their conscious awareness, which gives them an opportunity, if they're prepared, to integrate them in a more healthy way. Okay, so far, psychedelics are a class of drugs which can affect our emotion, thoughts, perception, and sense of self in a manner that's consistent with manifesting latent or hidden aspects of our minds. And now, for the last portion of this video, I want to talk about how recent research in neuroscience and psychology can inform or complement these earlier perspectives. And in particular, I want to talk to you about this fascinating new model called the Relaxed Beliefs Under Psychedelics, or REBUS model, which was recently proposed by leading psychedelic neuroscientist Robin Carhart-Harris. Now, there's a lot to say about this model, but the main idea is that psychedelics elicit their changes to our consciousness by reducing the stability or rigidity of our models of how the world is and who we are. So very briefly, the idea here is that usually our experience of reality is mediated by models we construct of how things are. And these models emphasize some things and ignore some other things. Because at the end of the day, having a model is a way of reducing the complexity of experience in a way that's manageable and understandable. And so these models function to interpret our experience and give it a sense of orderliness and predictability. But the thing is, these models can vary in how accurate they are in explaining reality and how much they can promote healthy or unhealthy behaviors. So the idea is that by making these models less rigid and more susceptible to being changed, we're now all of a sudden opened up to a lot of information we had previously been ignoring and are giving an opportunity to revise our models in a more healthy way. And so to link this to Stanislav Grof and Humphrey Osmond, the idea is that the ability for psychedelics to amplify our hidden aspects of our mind is based in the ability of these drugs to reduce the models which are blocking them from coming up. So again, just to summarize, psychedelics may work by reducing the rigidity of our models of reality, which then gives greater space for new information information from our memories, from our experiences, and from the external environment to flood into our conscious awareness, and thereby allow us to revise these models in more healthy ways. If, importantly, we're prepared and in the right context and ready to really dive deep into ourselves. Alright, so this was a lot of information and there's so much stuff to dive into here, but I hope this has given you a good amount of context to understand what psychedelics are and why I think they are fascinating and important compounds. Please leave any comments below about how you found the video and if there is any particular area that you found interesting that you want me to focus on in the future. And of course, if you're interested in weekly videos from me on the latest in psychedelic science, please hit subscribe above, and I hope to see you soon.